In the forenoon the fight is equal, but Agamemnon turns the fortune of the day towards the Achaeans until he gets wounded and leaves the field. Hector then drives everything before him till he is wounded by Diomed. Paris wounds Diomed. Ulysses, Nestor, and Idomeneus perform prodigies of valour. Machaon is wounded. Nestor drives him off in his chariot. Achilles sees the pair driving towards the camp, and sends Patroclus to ask who it is that is wounded. This is the beginning of evil for Patroclus. Nestor makes a long speech. And now, as dawn rose from her couch beside Tithonus, harbinger of light alike to mortals and immortals, Jove sent fierce Discord, with the ensign of war in her hands, to the ships of the Achaeans. She took her stand by the huge black hull of Ulysses' ship, which was middlemost of all, so that her voice might carry farthest on either side, on the one hand towards the tents of Ajax, son of Telamon, and on the other towards those of Achilles. For these two heroes, well assured of their own strength, had valorously drawn up their ships at the two ends of the line. There she took her stand, and raised a cry both loud and shrill that filled the Achaeans with courage, giving them heart to fight resolutely and with all their might, so that they had rather stay there and do battle than go home in their ships. The son of Atreus shouted aloud and bade the Argives gird themselves for battle, while he put on his armour. First he girded his goodly greaves about his legs, making them fast with ankle clasps of silver, and about his chest he set the breastplate which Cinyras had once given him as a guest gift. It had been nosed abroad as far as Cyprus that the Achaeans were about to sail for Troy, and therefore he gave it to the king. It had 10 courses of dark cyanus, 12 of gold and 10 of tin. There were serpents of cyanus that reared themselves up towards the neck, 3 on either side, like the rainbows which the son of Saturn had set in heaven as a sign to mortal men. About his shoulders he threw his sword, studded with bosses of gold, and the scabbard was of silver, with a chain of gold wherewith to hang it. He took, moreover, the richly dight shield that covered his body when he was in battle, fair to see, with 10 circles of bronze running all round it. On the body of the shield there were 20 bosses of white tin, with another of dark cyanus in the middle. This last was made to show a Gorgon's head, fierce and grim, with rout and panic on either side. The band for the arm to go through was of silver, on which there was a writhing snake of cyanus, with 3 heads that sprang from a single neck and went in and out among one another. On his head Agamemnon set a helmet, with a peak before and behind, and 4 plumes of horsehair that nodded menacingly above it. Then he grasped 2 redoubtable bronze-shod spears, and the gleam of his armour shot from him as a flame into the firmament, while Juno and Minerva thundered in honour of the king of rich Mycenae. Every man now left his horses in charge of his charioteer to hold them in readiness by the trench, while he went into battle on foot, clad in full armour, and a mighty uproar rose on high into the dawning. The chiefs were armed and at the trench before the horses got there, but these came up presently. The son of Saturn sent a portent of evil sound about their host, and the dew fell red with blood, for he was about to send many a brave man hurrying down to Hades. The Trojans, on the other side, upon the rising slope of the plain, were gathered round great Hector, noble Polydamas, Aeneas, who was honoured by the Trojans like an immortal, and the 3 sons of Antenor, Polybus, Agenor, and the young Acamas, beautiful as a god. Hector's round shield showed in the front rank, and as some baneful star that shines for a moment through a rent in the clouds and is again hidden beneath them, even so was Hector now seen in the front ranks and now again in the hindmost, and his bronze armour gleamed like the lightning of aegis-bearing Jove. And now, as a band of reapers mows swathes of wheat or barley upon a rich man's land, and the sheaves fall thick before them, even so did the Trojans and Achaeans fall upon one another. They were in no mood for yielding, but fought like wolves, and neither side got the better of the other. Discord was glad as she beheld them, for she was the only god that went among them. The others were not there, but stayed quietly, each in his own home among the dells and valleys of Olympus. All of them blamed the son of Saturn for wanting to give victory to the Trojans, but Father Jove heeded them not. he held aloof from all, and sat apart in his all-glorious majesty, looking down upon the city of the Trojans, the ships of the Achaeans, the gleam of bronze, and alike upon the slayers and on the slain. Now, so long as the day waxed and it was still morning, their darts rained thick on one another, and the people perished. And as the hour drew nigh when a woodsman, working in some mountain forest, will get his midday meal, for he has felled till his hands are weary, he is tired out, and must now have food, then the Danaans, with a cry that rang through all their ranks, broke the battalions of the enemy. Agamemnon led them on, and slew first Bienor, a leader of his people, and afterwards his comrade and charioteer Oileus, who sprang from his chariot and was coming full towards him. But Agamemnon struck him on the forehead with his spear. His bronze visor was of no avail against the weapon, which pierced both bronze and bone, so that his brains were battered in, and he was killed in full flight. Agamemnon stripped their shirts from off them, and left them with their breasts all bare to lie where they had fallen. He then went on to kill Isus and Antiphus, 2 sons of Priam, the one a bastard, the other born in wedlock. They were in the same chariot, the bastard driving, while noble Antiphus fought beside him. Achilles had once taken both of them prisoner in the glades of Ida, and had bound them with fresh wires as they were shepherding, but he had taken a ransom for them. Now, however, Agamemnon, son of Atreus, smote Isus in the chest above the nipple with his spear, while he struck Antiphus hard by the ear and threw him from his chariot. Forthwith he stripped their goodly armour from off them, and recognized them, for he had already seen them at the ships when Achilles brought them in from Ida. As a lion fastens on the fawns of a hind and crushes them in his great jaws, robbing them of their tender life while he is on his way back to his lair, the hind can do nothing for them, even though she be close by, for she is in an agony of fear and flies through the thick forest, sweating and at her utmost speed before the mighty monster. So no man of the Trojans could help Isus and Antiphus, for they were themselves flying in panic before the Argives. Then King Agamemnon took the 2 sons of Antimachus, Pisander and brave Hippolochus. It was Antimachus who had been foremost in preventing Helen's being restored to Menelaus, for he was largely bribed by Alexandrus. And now Agamemnon took his 2 sons, both in the same chariot, trying to bring their horses to a stand, for they had lost hold of the reins, and the horses were mad with fear. The son of Atreus sprang upon them like a lion, and the pair besought him from their chariot. "Take us alive," they cried, "son of Atreus, and you shall receive a great ransom for us. Our father Antimachus has great store of gold, bronze, and wrought iron, and from this he will satisfy you with a very large ransom should he hear of our being alive at the ships of the Achaeans." With such piteous words and tears did they beseech the king, but they heard no pitiful answer in return. "If," said Agamemnon, "you are sons of Antimachus, who once at a council of Trojans proposed that Menelaus and Ulysses, who had come to you as envoys, should be killed and not suffered to return, you shall now pay for the foul iniquity of your father." As he spoke, he felled Pisander from his chariot to the earth, smiting him on the chest with his spear, so that he lay face uppermost upon the ground. Hippolochus fled, but him too did Agamemnon smite. He cut off his hands and his head, which he sent rolling in among the crowd as though it were a ball. Then he let them both lie, and wherever the ranks were thickest, thither he flew, while the other Achaeans followed. Foot soldiers drove the foot soldiers of the foe in rout before them, and slew them. Horsemen did the like by horsemen, and the thundering tramp of the horses raised a cloud of dust from off the plain. King Agamemnon followed after, ever slaying them and cheering on the Achaeans. As when some mighty forest is all ablaze, the eddying gusts whirl fire in all directions till the thickets shrivel and are consumed before the blast of the flame, even so fell the heads of the flying Trojans before Agamemnon, son of Atreus, and many a noble pair of steeds drew an empty chariot along the highways of war for lack of drivers, who were lying on the plain, more useful now to vultures than to their wives. Jove drew Hector away from the darts and dust with the carnage and din of battle, but the son of Atreus sped onwards, calling out lustily to the Danaans. They flew on by the tomb of old Aeolus, son of Dardanus, in the midst of the plain, and past the place of the wild fig tree, making always for the city, the son of Atreus still shouting, and with hands all bedrabbled in gore, But when they had reached the Scaean gates and the oak tree, there they halted and waited for the others to come up. Meanwhile the Trojans kept on flying over the middle of the plain like a herd of cows, maddened with fright when a lion has attacked them in the dead of night. He springs on one of them, seizes her neck in the grip of his strong teeth, and then laps up her blood and gorges himself upon her entrails. Even so did King Agamemnon, son of Atreus, pursue the foe, ever slaughtering the hindmost as they fled pell-mell before him. Many a man was flung headlong from his chariot by the hand of the son of Atreus, for he wielded his spear with fury. But when he was just about to reach the high wall and the city, the father of gods and men came down from heaven and took his seat, thunderbolt in hand, upon the crest of many-fountained Ida. He then told Iris of the golden wings to carry a message for him. "Go," said he, "fleet Iris, and speak thus to Hector. Say that, so long as he sees Agamemnon heading his men and making havoc of the Trojan ranks, he is to keep aloof and bid the others bear the brunt of the battle. But when Agamemnon is wounded, either by spear or arrow, and takes to his chariot, then will I vouchsafe him strength to slay till he reach the ships, and night falls at the going down of the sun." Iris hearkened and obeyed. Down she went to strong Iliad from the crests of Ida, and found Hector, son of Priam, standing by his chariot and horses. Then she said, "Hector, son of Priam, peer of gods in council, Father Jove has sent me to bear you this message. So long as you see Agamemnon heading his men and making havoc of the Trojan ranks, you are to keep aloof and bid the others bear the brunt of the battle. But when Agamemnon is wounded, either by spear or arrow, and takes to his chariot, then will Jove vouchsafe you strength to slay till you reach the ships, and till night falls at the going down of the sun." When she had thus spoken, Iris left him, and Hector sprang full armed from his chariot to the ground, brandishing his spear as he went about everywhere among the host, cheering his men on to fight, and stirring the dread strife of battle. The Trojans then wheeled round and again met the Achaeans, while the Argives on their part strengthened their battalions. The battle was now in array, and they stood face to face with one another, Agamemnon ever pressing forward in his eagerness to be ahead of all others. "Tell me now, ye muses that dwell in the mansions of Olympus, who, whether of the Trojans or of their allies, was the first to face Agamemnon?" "It was Iphidamas, son of Antenor, a man both brave and of great stature, who was brought up in fertile Thrace, the mother of sheep. Cisses, his mother's father, brought him up in his own house when he was a child. Cisses, father to fair Theano. When he reached manhood, Cisses would have kept him there, and was for giving him his daughter in marriage. But as soon as he had married, he set out to fight the Achaeans with 12 ships that followed him. These he had left at Percote, and had come on by land to Ilias. He it was that now met Agamemnon, son of Atreus. When they were close up with one another, the son of Atreus missed his aim, and Iphidamas hit him on the girdle below the cuirass, and then flung himself upon him, trusting to his strength of arm. The girdle, however, was not pierced, nor nearly so, for the point of the spear struck against the silver, and was turned aside as though it had been lead. King Agamemnon caught it from his hand and drew it towards him with the fury of a lion. He then drew his sword and killed Iphidamas by striking him on the neck. So there the poor fellow lay, sleeping a sleep as it were of bronze, killed in the defence of his fellow citizens, far from his wedded wife, of whom he had had no joy, though he had given much for her. He had given 100 head of cattle down, and had promised later on to give 1,000 sheep and goats mixed from the countless flocks of which he was possessed. Agamemnon, son of Atreus, then despoiled him, and carried off his armour into the host of the Achaeans. When noble Coon, Antenor's eldest son, saw this, sore indeed were his eyes at the sight of his fallen brother. Unseen by Agamemnon, he got beside him, spear in hand, and wounded him in the middle of his arm below the elbow, the point of the spear going right through the arm. Agamemnon was convulsed with pain, but still not even for this did he leave off struggling and fighting, but grasped his spear that flew as fleet as the wind, and sprang upon Coon, who was trying to drag off the body of his brother, his father's son, by the foot, and was crying for help to all the bravest of his comrades. But Agamemnon struck him with a bronze-shod spear and killed him as he was dragging the dead body through the press of men under cover of his shield. He then cut off his head, standing over the body of Iphidamas. Thus did the sons of Antenor meet their fate at the hands of the son of Atreus, and go down into the house of Hades. As long as the blood still welled warm from his wound, Agamemnon went about attacking the ranks of the enemy with spear and sword and with great handfuls of stone. But when the blood had ceased to flow and the wound grew dry, the pain became great. As the sharp pangs which the Eileithyai, goddesses of childbirth, daughters of Juno, and dispensers of cruel pain, send upon a woman when she is in labour, even so sharp were the pangs of the son of Atreus. He sprang onto his chariot, and bade his charioteer drive to the ships, for he was in great agony. With a loud, clear voice he shouted to the Danaans, "My friends, princes and counsellors of the Argives, defend the ships yourselves, for Jove has not suffered me to fight the whole day through against the Trojans." With this the charioteer turned his horses towards the ships, and they flew forward, nothing loath. Their chests were white with foam, and their bellies with dust, as they drew the wounded king out of the battle. When Hector saw Agamemnon quit the field, he shouted to the Trojans and Lycians, saying, "Trojans, Lycians, and Dardanian warriors, be men, my friends, and acquit yourselves in battle bravely. Their best man has left them, and Jove has vouchsafed me a great triumph. Charge the foe with your chariots, that you may win still greater glory." With these words he put heart and soul into them all, and as a huntsman hounds his dogs on against a lion or wild boar, even so did Hector, peer of Mars, hound the proud Trojans on against the Achaeans. Full of hope he plunged in among the foremost, and fell on the fight like some fierce tempest that swoops down upon the sea and lashes its deep blue waters into fury. What, then, is the full tale of those whom Hector, son of Priam, killed in the hour of triumph which Jove then vouchsafed him? First Osaeus, Autonous, and Opytes, Dolops, son of Clytius, Opheltius, and Agelaus, Asimnus, Orus, and Hipponous, steadfast in battle. These chieftains of the Achaeans did Hector slay, and then he fell upon the rank and file. As when the west wind hustles the clouds of the white south, and beats them down with the fierceness of its fury, the waves of the sea roll high, and the spray is flung aloft in the rage of the wandering wind, even so thick were the heads of them that fell by the hand of Hector. All had then been lost, and no help for it, and the Achaeans would have fled pell-mell to their ships, had not Ulysses cried out to Diomed, "Son of Tydeus, what has happened to us that we thus forget our prowess? Come, my good fellows, stand by my side and help me. We shall be shamed for ever if Hector takes the ships." And Diomed answered, "Come what may, I will stand firm. But we shall have scant joy of it, for Jove is minded to give victory to the Trojans rather than to us." With these words he struck Thymbraeus from his chariot to the ground, smiting him in the left breast with his spear, while Ulysses killed Mauleon, who was his squire. These they let lie, now that they had stopped their fighting. The two heroes then went on playing havoc with the foe, like two wild boars that turn in fury and rend the hounds that hunt them. Thus did they turn upon the Trojans and slay them, and the Achaeans were thankful to have breathing time in their flight from Hector. They then took two princes with their chariot, the two sons of Merops of Percote, who excelled all others in the arts of divination. He had forbidden his sons to go to the war, but they would not obey him, for fate lured them to their fall. Diomed, son of Tydeus, slew them both, and stripped them of their armour, while Ulysses killed Hippodamus and Hypereicus. And now the son of Saturn, as he looked down from Ida, ordained that neither side should have the advantage, and they kept on killing one another. The son of Tydeus speared Agastrophus, son of Paeon, in the hip joint with his spear. His chariot was not at hand for him to fly with, so blindly confident had he been. His squire was in charge of it at some distance, and he was fighting on foot among the foremost until he lost his life. Hector soon marked the havoc Diomed and Ulysses were making, and bore down upon them with a loud cry, followed by the Trojan ranks. Brave Diomed was dismayed when he saw them, and said to Ulysses, who was beside him, "Great Hector is bearing down upon us, and we shall be undone. Let us stand firm and wait his onset." He poised his spear as he spoke, and hurled it, nor did he miss his mark. He had aimed at Hector's head near the top of his helmet, but bronze was turned by bronze, and Hector was untouched, for the spear was stayed by the visored helm made with 3 plates of metal which Phoebus Apollo had given him. Hector sprang back with a great bound under cover of the ranks. He fell on his knees and propped himself with his brawny hand leaning on the ground, for darkness had fallen on his eyes. The son of Tydeus, having thrown his spear, dashed in among the foremost fighters to the place where he had seen it strike the ground. Meanwhile Hector recovered himself, and springing back into his chariot mingled with the crowd, by which means he saved his life. But Diomed made at him with his spear, and said, "Dog, you have again got away, though death was close on your heels. Phoebus Apollo, to whom I ween you pray ere you go into battle, has again saved you. Nevertheless, I will meet you and make an end of you hereafter, if there is any god who will stand by me too and be my helper. For the present I must pursue those I can lay hands on." As he spoke, he began stripping the spoils from the son of Paeon, but Alexandrus, husband of lovely Helen, aimed an arrow at him, leaning against a pillar of the monument which men had raised to Aeolus, son of Dardanus, a ruler in days of old. Diomed had taken the cuirass from off the breast of Agastrophus, his heavy helmet also, and the shield from off his shoulders, when Paris drew his bow and let fly an arrow that sped not from his hand in vain, but pierced the flat of Diomed's right foot, going right through it and fixing itself in the ground. Thereon Paris, with a hearty laugh, sprang forward from his hiding place and taunted him, saying, "You are wounded. My arrow has not been shot in vain. Would that it had hit you in the belly and killed you, for thus the Trojans, who fear you as goats fear a lion, would have had a truce from evil." Diomed, all undaunted, answered, "Archer, you who without your bow are nothing, slanderer and seducer, if you were to be tried in single combat, fighting in full armour, your bow and your arrows would serve you in little stead. Vain is your boast in that you have scratched the sole of my foot. I care no more than if a girl or some silly boy had hit me. A worthless coward could inflict but a light wound. When I wound a man, though I but graze his skin, it is another matter, for my weapon will lay him low. His wife will tear her cheeks for grief, and his children will be fatherless. There will he rot, reddening the earth with his blood, and vultures, not women, will gather round him." Thus he spoke, but Ulysses came up and stood over him. Under this cover he sat down to draw the arrow from his foot, and sharp was the pain he suffered as he did so. Then he sprang onto his chariot and bade the charioteer drive him to the ships, for he was sick at heart. Ulysses was now alone. Not one of the Argives stood by him, for they were all panic-stricken. "Alas," said he to himself in his dismay, "what will become of me? It is ill if I turn and fly before these odds, but it will be worse if I am left alone and taken prisoner, for the son of Saturn has struck the rest of the Dardanians with panic. But why talk to myself in this way? Well do I know that though cowards quit the field, a hero, whether he wound or be wounded, must stand firm and hold his own." While he was thus in 2 minds, the ranks of the Trojans advanced and hemmed him in, and bitterly did they come to rue it. As hounds and lusty youths set upon a wild boar that sallies from his lair, whetting his white tusks, they attacked him from every side, and can hear the gnashing of his jaws, but for all his fierceness they still hold their ground. Even so furiously did the Trojans attack Ulysses. First he sprang, spear in hand, upon Diopytes, and wounded him on the shoulder with a downward blow. Then he killed Thoon and Enomus. After these he struck Chersidamus in the loins under his shield as he had just sprung down from his chariot. So he fell in the dust and clutched the earth in the hollow of his hand. These he let lie, and went on to wound Charops, son of Hippasus, own brother to noble Socus. Socos, hero that he was, made all speed to help him, and when he was close to Ulysses, he said, "Far-famed Ulysses, insatiable of craft and toil, this day you shall either boast of having killed both the sons of Hippasus and stripped them of their armour, or you shall fall before my spear." With these words he struck the shield of Ulysses. The spear went through the shield and passed on through his richly wrought cuirass, tearing the flesh from his side, but Pallas Minerva did not suffer it to pierce the entrails of the hero. Ulysses knew that his hour was not yet come, but he gave ground and said to Socus, "Wretch, you shall now surely die. You have stayed me from fighting further with the Trojans, but you shall now fall by my spear, yielding glory to myself, and your soul to Hades of the noble steeds." Cercus had turned in flight, but as he did so, the spear struck him in the back, midway between the shoulders, and went right through his chest. He fell heavily to the ground, and Ulysses vaunted over him, saying, "O Cercus, son of Hippasus, tamer of horses, death has been too quick for you, and you have not escaped him. Poor wretch, not even in death shall your father and mother close your eyes, but the ravening vultures shall enshroud you with the flapping of their dark wings and devour you. Whereas, even though I fall, the Achaeans will give me my due rites of burial." So saying, he drew Cercus's heavy spear out of his flesh and from his shield, and the blood welled forth when the spear was withdrawn, so that he was much dismayed. When the Trojans saw that Ulysses was bleeding, they raised a great shout, and came on in a body towards him. He therefore gave ground, and called his comrades to come and help him. Thrice did he cry as loudly as man can cry, and thrice did brave Menelaus hear him. He turned therefore to Ajax, who was close beside him, and said, "Ajax, noble son of Telamon, captain of your people, the cry of Ulysses rings in my ears, as though the Trojans had cut him off and were worsting him while he is single-handed. Let us make our way through the throng. It will be well that we can defend him. I fear he may come to harm for all his valour if he be left without support, and the Danaans would miss him sorely." He led the way, and mighty Ajax went with him. The Trojans had gathered round Ulysses like ravenous mountain jackals round the carcass of some horned stag that has been hit with an arrow. The staggers fled at full speed so long as his blood was warm and his strength has lasted, but when the arrow has overcome him, the savage jackals devour him in the shady glades of the forest. Then heaven sends a fierce lion thither, whereon the jackals fly in terror, and the lion robs them of their prey. Even so did Trojans, many and brave, gather round crafty Ulysses, but the hero stood at bay and kept them off with his spear. Ajax then came up with his shield before him like a wall, and stood hard by, whereon the Trojans fled in all directions. Menelaus took Ulysses by the hand and led him out of the press, while his squire brought up his chariot. But Ajax rushed furiously on the Trojans and killed Doryclus, a bastard son of Priam. Then he wounded Pandocus, Lysandrus, Pyrasus, and Pylates. As some swollen torrent comes rushing in full flood from the mountains onto the plain, big with rain of heaven, many a dry oak and many a pine does it engulf, and much mud does it bring down and cast into the sea. Even so did brave Ajax chase the foe furiously over the plain, slaying both men and horses. Hector did not yet know what Ajax was doing, for he was fighting on the extreme left of the battle by the banks of the river Scamander, where the carnage was thickest and the war cry loudest round Nestor and brave Idomeneus. Among these Hector was making great slaughter with his spear and furious driving, and was destroying the ranks that were opposed to him. Still the Achaeans would have given no ground, had not Alexandrus, husband of lovely Helen, stayed the prowess of Machaon, shepherd of his people, by wounding him in the right shoulder with a triple-barbed arrow. The Achaeans were in great fear that as the fight had turned against them, the Trojans might take him prisoner, and Idomeneus said to Nestor, "Nestor, son of Neleus, honour to the Achaean name, mount your chariot at once. Take Machaon with you, and drive your horses to the ships as fast as you can. A physician is worth more than several other men put together, for he can cut out arrows and spread healing herbs." Nestor, knight of Gerene, did as Idomeneus had counselled. He at once mounted his chariot, and Machaon, son of the famed physician Aesculapius, went with him. He lashed his horses, and they flew onward nothing loath towards the ships, as though of their own free will. Then Cebriones, seeing the Trojans in confusion, said to Hector from his place beside him, "Hector, here are we two fighting on the extreme wing of the battle, while the other Trojans are in pell-mell rout, they and their horses. Ajax, son of Telamon, is driving them before him. I know him by the breadth of his shield. Let us turn our chariot and horses thither, where horse and foot are fighting most desperately, and where the cry of battle is loudest." With this he lashed his goodly steeds, and when they felt the whip, they drew the chariot full speed among the Achaeans and Trojans, over the bodies and shields of those that had fallen. The axle was bespattered with blood, and the rail round the car was covered with splashes both from the horses' hoofs and from the tyres of the wheels. Hector tore his way through and flung himself into the thick of the fight, and his presence threw the Danaans into confusion, for his spear was not long idle. Nevertheless, though he went among the ranks with sword and spear and throwing great stones, he avoided Ajax, son of Telamon, for Jove would have been angry with him if he had fought a better man than himself. Then Father Jove from his high throne struck fear into the heart of Ajax, so that he stood there dazed and threw his shield behind him, looking fearfully at the throng of his foes as though he was some wild beast, and turning hither and thither, but crouching slowly backwards. As peasants with their hounds chase a lion from their stockyard and watch by night to prevent his carrying off the pick of their herd, he makes his greedy spring, but in vain, for the darts from many a strong hand fall thick around him with burning brands that scare him for all his fury, and when morning comes he slinks, foiled and angry, away. Even so did Ajax, sorely against his will, retreat angrily before the Trojans, fearing for the ships of the Achaeans. Or as some lazy ass that has had many a cudgel broken about his back, when he into a field begins eating the corn, boys beat him, but he is too many for them, and though they lay about with their sticks they cannot hurt him. Still, when he has had his fill, they at last drive him from the field. Even so did the Trojans and their allies pursue great Ajax, ever smiting the middle of his shield with their darts. Now and again he would turn and show fight, but keeping back the battalions of the Trojans, and then he would again retreat, but he prevented any of them from making his way to the ships. Single-handed he stood midway between the Trojans and Achaeans. The spears that sped from their hands struck some of them in his mighty shield, while many, though thirsting for his blood, fell to the ground ere they could reach him to the wounding of his fair flesh. Now when Eurypylus, the brave son of Uaemon, saw that Ajax was being overpowered by the rain of arrows, he went up to him and hurled his spear. He struck Apasion, the son of Phausius, in the liver below the midriff, and laid him low. Eurypylus sprang upon him and stripped the armour from his shoulders, but when Alexandrus saw him, he aimed an arrow at him which struck him in the right thigh. The arrow broke, but the point that was left in the wound dragged on the thigh. He drew back, therefore, under cover of his comrades to save his life, shouting as he did so to the Danaans, "My friends, princes and counsellors of the Argives, rally to the defence of Ajax, who is being overpowered, and I doubt whether he will come out of the fight alive. Hither, then, to the rescue of great Ajax, son of Telamon." Even so did he cry when he was wounded. Thereon the others came near and gathered round him, holding their shields upwards from their shoulders so as to give him cover. Ajax then made towards them, and turned round to stand at bay as soon as he had reached his men. Thus then did they fight, as it were a flaming fire. Meanwhile the mares of Neleus, all in a lather with sweat, were bearing Nestor out of the fight, and with him Machaon, shepherd of his people. Achilles saw and took note, for he was standing on the stern of his ship, watching the hard stress and struggle of the fight. He called from the ship to his comrade Patroclus, who heard him in the tent, and came out looking like Mars himself. Here indeed was the beginning of the ill that presently befell him. "Why," said he, "Achilles, do you call me? What do you want with me?" And Achilles answered, "Noble son of Menoetius, man after my own heart, I take it that I shall now have the Achaeans praying at my knees, for they are in great straits. Go, Patroclus, and ask Nestor who it is that he is bearing away wounded from the field. From his back I should say it was Machaon, son of Aesculapius, but I could not see his face, for the horses went by me at full speed." Patroclus did as his dear comrade had bidden him, and set off running by the ships and tents of the Achaeans. When Nestor and Machaon had reached the tents of the son of Neleus, they dismounted, and an esquire, Eurymedon, took the horses from the chariot. The pair then stood in the breeze by the seaside to dry the sweat from their shirts, and when they had so done, they came inside and took their seats. Fair Hecamede, whom Nestor had had awarded to him from Tenedos when Achilles took it, mixed them a mess. She was daughter of wise Asinous, and the Achaeans had given her to Nestor because he excelled all of them in counsel. First she set for them a fair and well-made table that had feet of cyanus. On it there was a vessel of bronze and an onion to give relish to the drink, with honey and cakes of barley meal. There was also a cup of rare workmanship which the old man had brought with him from home, studded with bosses of gold. It had 4 handles, on each of which there were 2 golden doves feeding, and it had 2 feet to stand on. Anyone else would hardly have been able to lift it from the table when it was full, but Nestor could do so quite easily. In this the woman, as fair as a goddess, mixed them a mess with Pramnian wine. She grated goat's milk cheese into it with a bronze grater, threw in a handful of white barley meal, and having thus prepared the mess, she bade them drink it. When they had done so, and had thus quenched their thirst, they fell talking with one another, and at this moment Patroclus appeared at the door. When the old man saw him, he sprang from his seat, seized his hand, led him into the tent, and bade him take his place among them. But Patroclus stood where he was, and said, "Noble sir, I may not stay. You cannot persuade me to come in. He that sent me is not one to be trifled with, and he bade me ask who the wounded man was whom you were bearing away from the field. I can see now for myself that he is Machaon, shepherd of his people. I must go back and tell Achilles. You, sir, know what a terrible man he is, and how ready to blame, even where no blame should lie." And Nestor answered, "Why should Achilles care to know how many of the Achaeans may be wounded? He recks not of the dismay that reigns in our host. Our most valiant chieftains lie disabled. Brave Diomed, son of Tydeus, is wounded. So are Ulysses and Agamemnon. Eurypylus has been hit with an arrow in the thigh, and I have just been bringing this man from the field, he too wounded with an arrow. Nevertheless, Achilles, so valiant though he be, cares not and knows no ruth. Will he wait till the ships, do what we may, are in a blaze, and we perish one upon the other? As for me, I have no strength nor stay in me any longer. Would that I was still young and strong, as in the days when there was a fight between us and the men of Aeolus about some cattle raiding. I then killed Itymoneus, the valiant son of Hypereiacus, a dweller in Elis, as I was driving in the spoil. He was hit by a dart thrown by my hand while fighting in the front rank in defence of his cows, so he fell, and the country people around him were in great fear. We drove off a vast quantity of booty from the plains, 50 herds of cattle, and as many flocks of sheep, 50 droves also of pigs, and as many widespread flocks of goats. Of horses, moreover, we seized 150, all of them mares, and many had foals running with them. All these did we drive by night to Pylus, the city of Neleus, taking them within the city, and the heart of Neleus was glad in that I had taken so much, though it was the first time I had ever been in the field. At daybreak the heralds went round crying that all in Elis to whom there was a debt owing should come, and the leading Pylians assembled to divide the spoils. There were many to whom the Epeans owed chattels, for we men of Pylus were few, and had been oppressed with wrong. In former years Hercules had come, and had laid his hand heavy upon us, so that all our best men had perished. Neleus had had 12 sons, but I alone was left. The others had all been killed. The Epeans, presuming upon all this, had looked down upon us, and had done us much evil. My father chose a herd of cattle and a great flock of sheep, 300 in all, and he took their shepherds with him, for there was a great debt due to him in Elis, to wit 4 horses, winners of prizes. They and their chariots with them had gone to the games and were to run for a tripod, but King Algaeus took them and sent back their driver, grieving for the loss of his horses. Neleus was angered by what he had both said and done, and took great value in return, but he divided the rest, that no man might have less than his full share. Thus did we order all things, and offer sacrifices to the gods throughout the city. But 3 days afterwards the Epeans came in a body, many in number, they and their chariots in full array, and with them the 2 Moliones in their armour, though they were still lads and unused to fighting. Now there is a certain town, Thyaressa, perched upon a rock on the river Alpheus, the border city of Pylus. This they would destroy, and pitch their camp about it, but when they had crossed their whole plain, Minerva darted down by night from Olympus, and bade us set ourselves in array. And she found willing soldiers in Pylos, for the men meant fighting. Neleus would not let me arm and hid my horses, for he said that as yet I could know nothing about war. Nevertheless, Minerva so ordered the fight that, all on foot as I was, I fought among our mounted forces, and vied with the foremost of them. There is a river Menaius that falls into the sea near Irene, and there they that were mounted, and I with them, waited till morning, when the companies of foot soldiers came up with us in force. Thence in full panoply and equipment we came towards noon to the sacred waters of the Alpheus, and there we offered victims to Almighty Jove, with a bull to Alpheus, another to Neptune, and a herd heifer to Minerva. After this we took supper in our companies, and laid us down to rest, each in his armour, by the river. The Epeans were beleaguering the city, and were determined to take it, but ere this might be, there was a desperate fight in store for them. When the sun's rays began to fall upon the earth, we joined battle, praying to Jove and to Minerva. And when the fight had begun, I was the first to kill my man and take his horses, to wit the warrior Mulius. He was son-in-law to Argaeus, having married his eldest daughter, golden-hair Agamemnon, who knew the virtues of every herb which grows upon the face of the earth. I speared him as he was coming towards me, and when he fell headlong in the dust, I sprang upon his chariot and took my place in the front ranks. The Epeans fled in all directions when they saw the captain of their horsemen, the best man they had, laid low, and I swept down on them like a whirlwind, taking 50 chariots, and in each of them 2 men bit the dust, slain by my spear. I should have even killed the 2 Moliones, sons of Actor, unless their real father, Neptune, lord of the earthquake, had hidden them in a thick mist and borne them out of the fight. Thereon Jove vouchsafed the Pylians a great victory, for we chased them far over the plain, killing the men and bringing in their armour, till we had brought our horses to Buprasium, rich in wheat, and to the Olenian rock, with a hill that is called Alision, on which point Minerva turned the people back. There I slew the last man and left him. Then the Achaeans drove their horses back from Buprasium to Pylos, and gave thanks to Jove among the gods, and among mortal men to Nestor. Such was I among my peers, as surely as ever was. But Achilles is for keeping all his valour for himself. Bitterly will he rue it hereafter, when the host has been cut to pieces. My good friend, did not Menetius charge you thus on the day when he sent you from Phthia to Agamemnon? Ulysses and I were in the house inside, and heard all that he said to you, for we came to the fair house of Peleus while beating up recruits throughout all Achaea, and when we got there we found Menetius and yourself, and Achilles with you. The old knight Peleus was in the outer court, roasting the fat thigh bones of a heifer to Jove, the lord of thunder, and he held a gold chalice in his hand, from which he poured drink offerings of wine over the burning sacrifice. You 2 were busy cutting up the heifer, and at that moment we stood at the gates, whereon Achilles sprang to his feet, led us by the hand into the house, placed us at table, and set before us such hospitable entertainment as guests expect. When we had satisfied ourselves with meat and drink, I said my say, and urged both of you to join us. You were ready enough to do so, and the 2 old men charged you much and straitly. Old Peleus bade his son Achilles fight ever among the foremost, and outvie his peers, while Menetius, the son of Actor, spoke thus to you. My son, said he, Achilles is of nobler birth than you are, but you are older than he, though he is far the better man of the 2. Counsel him wisely, guide him in the right way, and he will follow you to his own profit. Thus did your father charge you, but you have forgotten. Nevertheless, even now, say all this to Achilles, if he will listen to you. Who knows, but with heaven's help you may talk him over, for it is good to take a friend's advice. If, however, he is fearful about some oracle, or if his mother has told him something from Jove, then let him send you, and let the rest of the Myrmidons follow with you, if perchance you may bring light and saving to the Danaans. And let him send you into battle clad in his own armour, that the Trojans may mistake you for him, and leave off fighting. The sons of the Achaeans may thus have time to get their breath, for they are hard pressed, and there is little breathing time in battle. You, who are fresh, might easily drive a tired enemy back to his walls and away from the tents and ships. With these words he moved the heart of Patroclus, who set off running by the line of the ships to Achilles, descendant of Aeacus. When he had got as far as the ships of Ulysses, where there was a place of assembly and court of justice, with their altars dedicated to the gods, Eurypylus, son of Euaemon, met him, wounded in the thigh with an arrow, and limping out of the fight. Sweat rained from his head and shoulders, and black blood welled from his cruel wound, but his mind did not wander. The son of Menoetius, when he saw him, had compassion upon him, and spoke piteously, saying, "O unhappy princes and counsellors of the Danaan, are you then doomed to feed the hounds of Troy with your fat, far from your friends and your native land? Say, noble Eurypylus, will the Achaeans be able to hold great Hector in check, or will they fall now before his spear?" Wounded Eurypylus made answer, "Noble Patroclus, there is no hope left for the Achaeans, but they will perish at their ships. All they that were princes among us are lying struck down and wounded at the hands of the Trojans, who are waxing stronger and stronger. But save me, and take me to your ship. Cut out the arrow from my thigh. Wash the black blood from off it with warm water, and lay upon it those gracious herbs which, so they say, have been shown you by Achilles, who was himself shown them by Chiron, most righteous of all the centaurs. For of the physicians Podalirius and Machaon, I hear that the one is lying wounded in his tent, and is himself in need of healing, while the other is fighting the Trojans upon the plain." "Hero Eurypylus," replied the brave son of Menoetius, "how may these things be? What can I do? I am on my way to bear a message to noble Achilles from Nestor of Gerene, bulwark of the Achaeans, but even so I will not be unmindful of your distress." With this he clasped him round the middle and led him into his tent, and a servant, when he saw him, spread bullock skins on the ground for him to lie on. He laid him at full length and cut out the sharp arrow from his thigh. He washed the black blood from the wound with warm water. He then crushed a bitter herb, rubbing it between his hands, and spread it upon the wound. This was a virtuous herb which killed all pain, so the wound presently dried, and the blood left off flowing. The Trojans and their allies break the wall, led on by Hector. So the son of Menoetius was attending to the hurt of Eurypylus within the tent, but the Argives and Trojans still fought desperately, nor were the trench and the high wall above it to keep the Trojans in check longer. They had built it to protect their ships, and had dug the trench all round it that it might safeguard both the ships and the rich spoils which they had taken, but they had not offered hecatombs to the gods. It had been built without the consent of the immortals, and therefore it did not last. So long as Hector lived and Achilles nursed his anger, and so long as the city of Priam remained untaken, the great wall of the Achaeans stood firm. But when the bravest of the Trojans were no more, and many also of the Argives, though some were yet left alive, when moreover the city was sacked in the 10th year, and the Argives had gone back with their ships to their own country, then Neptune and Apollo took counsel to destroy the wall, and they turned on to it the streams of all the rivers from Mount Ida into the sea, Rhesus, Heptaporus, Charissus, Rhodius, Granicus, Aesopus, and goodly Scamander, with Simois, where many a shield and helm had fallen, and many a hero of the race of demigods had bitten the dust. Phoebus Apollo turned the mouths of all these rivers together, and made them flow for 9 days against the wall, while Jove reigned the whole time that he might wash it sooner into the sea. Neptune himself, trident in hand, surveyed the work, and threw into the sea all the foundations of beams and stones which the Achaeans had laid with so much toil. He made all level by the mighty stream of the Hellespont, and then, when he had swept the wall away, he spread a great beach of sand over the place where it had been. This done, he turned the rivers back into their old courses. This was what Neptune and Apollo were to do in after time. But as yet battle and turmoil were still raging round the wall, till its timbers rang under the blows that rained upon them. The Argives, cowed by the scourge of Jove, were hemmed in at their ships in fear of Hector, the mighty minister of a rout, who, as heretofore, fought with the force and fury of a whirlwind. As a lion or wild boar turns fiercely on the dogs and men that attack him, while these form a solid wall and shower their javelins as they face him, his courage is all undaunted, but his high spirit will be the death of him. Many a time does he charge at his pursuers to scatter them, and they fall back as often as he does so. Even so did Hector go about among the host, exhorting his men and cheering them on to cross the trench. But the horses dared not do so, and stood neighing upon its brink, for the width frightened them. They could neither jump it nor cross it, for it had overhanging banks all round upon either side, above which there were sharp stakes that the sons of the Achaeans had planted so close and strong as a defence against all who would assail it. A horse therefore could not get into it and draw his chariot after him, but those who were on foot kept trying their very utmost. Then Polydamas went up to Hector and said, "Hector, and you other captains of the Trojans and allies, it is madness for us to try and drive our horses across the trench. It will be very hard to cross, for it is full of sharp stakes, and beyond these there is the wall. Our horses therefore cannot get down into it, and it would be of no use if they did. Moreover, it is a narrow place, and we should come to harm. If, indeed, great Jove is minded to help the Trojans, and in his anger will utterly destroy the Achaeans, I would myself gladly see them perish now and here, far from Argos. But if they should rally, and we are driven back from the ships pell-mell into the trench, there will be not so much as a man get back to the city to tell the tale. Now, therefore, let us all do as I say. Let our squires hold our horses by the trench, but let us follow Hector in a body on foot, clad in full armour, and if the day of their doom is at hand, the Achaeans will not be able to withstand us." Thus spoke Polydamas, and his saying pleased Hector, who sprang in full armour to the ground, and all the other Trojans, when they saw him do so, also left their chariots. Each man then gave his horses over to his charioteer in charge to hold them ready for him at the trench. Then they formed themselves into companies, made themselves ready, and in 5 bodies followed their leaders. Those that went with Hector and Polydamas were the bravest and most in number, and the most determined to break through the wall and fight at the ships. Cebriones was also joined with them as third in command, for Hector had left his chariot in charge of a less valiant soldier. The next company was led by Paris, Alcatus, and Agenor, the third by Helenus and Deiphobus, 2 sons of Priam, and with them was the hero Asius, the son of Hyrtacus, whose great black horses of the breed that come from the river Salius had brought him from Arisbe. Aeneas, the valiant son of Anchises, led the fourth. He and the 2 sons of Antenor, Archilochus and Acamas, men well versed in all the arts of war. Sarpedon was captain over the allies, and took with him Glaucus and Asteropaeus, whom he deemed most valiant after himself, for he was far from the best man of them all. These helped to array one another in their ox-hide shields, and then charged straight at the Danaans, for they felt sure that they would not hold out longer, and that they should themselves now fall upon the ships. The rest of the Trojans and their allies now followed the counsel of Polydamas, but Asius, the son of Hyrtacus, would not leave his horses and his esquire behind him. In his foolhardiness he took them on with him towards the ships, nor did he fail to come by his end in consequence. Never more was he to return to wind-beaten Ilios, exulting in his chariot and his horses. Ere he could do so, death of ill-omened name had overshadowed him, and he had fallen by the spear of Idomeneus, the noble son of Deucalion. He had driven towards the left wing of the ships, by which way the Achaeans used to return with their chariots and horses from the plain. Hither he drove, and found the gates with their doors opened wide, and the great bar down, for the gatesmen kept them open so as to let those of their comrades enter who might be flying towards the ships. Hither of set purpose did he direct his horses, and his men followed him with a loud cry, for they felt sure that the Achaeans would not hold out longer, and that they should now fall upon the ships. Little did they know that at the gates they should find 2 of the bravest chieftains, proud sons of the fighting Lapithae, the one Polypoetes, mighty son of Pirithous, and the other Leontius, peer of murderous Mars. These stood before the gates like 2 high oak trees upon the mountains that tower from their wide-spreading roots, and year after year battle with wind and rain. Even so did these 2 men await the onset of great Asius confidently and without flinching. The Trojans, led by him and Iamenus, Orestes, Adamas, the son of Asius, Toon and Oenomaus, raised a loud cry of battle and made straight for the wall, holding their shields of dry ox-hide above their heads. For a while the 2 defenders remained inside and cheered the Achaeans on to stand firm in the defence of their ships. When, however, they saw that the Trojans were attacking the wall, while the Danaans were crying out for help and being routed, they rushed outside and fought in front of the gates, like 2 wild boars upon the mountains that abide the attack of men and dogs, and charging on either side, break down the wood all round them, tearing it up by the roots, and one can hear the clattering of their tusks, till someone hits them and makes an end of them. Even so did the gleaming bronze rattle about their breasts as the weapons fell upon them, for they fought with great fury, trusting to their own prowess and to those who were on the wall above them. These threw great stones at their assailants in defence of themselves, their tents, and their ships. The stones fell thick as the flakes of snow which some fierce blast drives from the dark clouds and showers down in sheets upon the earth. Even so fell the weapons from the hands alike of Trojans and Achaeans. Helmet and shield rang out as the great stones rained upon them, and Asius, the son of Hyrtacus, in his dismay, cried aloud and smote his 2 thighs. "Father Jove," he cried, "of a truth you too are altogether given to lying. I made sure the Argive heroes could not withstand us, whereas like slim-waisted wasps or bees that have their nests in the rocks by the wayside, they leave not the holes wherein they have built undefended, but fight for their little ones against all who would take them. Even so these men, though they be but 2, will not be driven from the gate, but stand firm either to slay or be slain." He spoke, but moved not the mind of Jove, whose counsel it then was to give glory to Hector. Meanwhile the rest of the Trojans were fighting about the other gates. I, however, am no god to be able to tell about all these things, for the battle raged everywhere about the stone wall as it were a fiery furnace. The Argives, discomfited though they were forced to defend their ships, and all the gods who were defending the Achaeans were vexed in spirit, but the Lapithae kept on fighting with might and main. Thereon Polypoetes, mighty son of Pirithous, hit Damasus with a spear upon his cheek-pierced helmet. The helmet did not protect him, for the point of the spear went through it and broke the bone, so that the brain inside was scattered about, and he died fighting. He then slew Pylon and Ormenus. Leontius, of the race of Mars, killed Hippomachus, the son of Antimachus, by striking him with his spear upon the girdle. He then drew his sword and sprang first upon Antiphates, whom he killed in combat, and who fell face upwards on the earth. After him he killed Menon, Iamenus, and Orestes, and laid them low one after the other. While they were busy stripping the armour from these heroes, the youths who were led on by Polydamas and Hector, and these were the greater part and the most valiant of those that were trying to break through the wall and fire the ships, were still standing by the trench, uncertain what they should do, for they had seen a sign from heaven when they had essayed to cross it, a soaring eagle that flew skirting the left wing of their host, with a monstrous blood-red snake in its talons, still alive and struggling to escape. The snake was still bent on revenge, wriggling and twisting itself backwards, till it struck the bird that held it on the neck and breast, whereon the bird, being in pain, let it fall, dropping it into the midst of the host, and then flew down the wind with a sharp cry. The Trojans were struck with terror when they saw the snake, portent of Aegis bearing Jove, writhing in the midst of them, and Polydamas went up to Hector and said, "Hector, at our councils of war you are ever given to rebuke me, even when I speak wisely, and though it were not well, forsooth, that one of the people should cross your will either in the field or at the council board, you would have them support you always. Nevertheless, I will say what I think will be best. Let us not now go on to fight the Danaans at their ships, for I know what will happen if this soaring eagle, which skirted the left wing of our host with a monstrous blood-red snake in its talons, the snake being still alive, was really sent as an omen to the Trojans on their essaying to cross the trench. The eagle let go her hold. She did not succeed in taking it home to her little ones, and so will it be with ourselves. Even though by a mighty effort we break through the gates and walls of the Achaeans, and they give way before us, still we shall not return in good order by the way we came, but shall leave many a man behind us, whom the Achaeans will do to death in defence of their ships. Thus would any seer who was expert in these matters and was trusted by the people read the portent." Hector looked fiercely at him and said, "Polydamas, I like not of your reading. You can find a better saying than this if you will. If, however, you have spoken in good earnest, then indeed has heaven robbed you of your reason. You would have me pay no heed to the counsels of Jove, nor to the promises he made me, and he bowed his head in confirmation. You bid me be ruled rather by the flight of wild fowl. What care I whether they fly towards dawn or dark, or whether they be on my right hand or on my left hand? Let us put our trust rather in the counsel of great Jove, king of mortals and immortals. There is one omen, and one only, that a man should fight for his country. Why are you so fearful? Though we be all of us slain at the ships of the Argives, you are not likely to be killed yourself, for you are not steadfast nor courageous. If you will not fight, or would talk others over from doing so, you shall fall forthwith before my spear." With these words he led the way, and the others followed after with a cry that rent the air. Then Jove, the Lord of Thunder, sent the blast of a mighty wind from the mountains of Ida, that bore the dust down towards the ships. He thus lulled the Achaeans into security, and gave victory to Hector and to the Trojans, who, trusting to their own might and to the signs he had shown them, essayed to break through the great wall of the Achaeans. They tore down the breastworks from the walls, and overthrew the battlements. They upheaved the buttresses which the Achaeans had set in front of the wall in order to support it. When they had pulled these down, they made sure of breaking through the wall, but the Danaans still showed no sign of giving ground. They still fenced the battlements with their shields of oxhide, and hurled their missiles down upon the foe as soon as any came below the wall. The two Ajaxes went about everywhere on the walls, cheering the Achaeans, giving fair words to some, while they spoke sharply to anyone whom they saw to be remiss. "My friends," they cried, "Argives one and all, good, bad, and indifferent, for there was never fight yet in which all were of equal prowess. There is now work enough, as you very well know, for all of you. See that you none of you turn in flight towards the ships, daunted by the shouting of the foe, but press forward and keep one another in heart, if it may be so that Olympian Jove, the Lord of Lightning, will vouchsafe us to repel our foes and drive them back towards the city." Thus did the two go about, shouting and cheering the Achaeans on. As the flakes that fall thick upon a winter's day, when Jove is minded to snow and to display these his arrows to mankind, he lulls the wind to rest, and snows hour after hour till he has buried the tops of the high mountains, the headlands that jut into the sea, the grassy plains, and the tilled fields of men. The snow lies deep upon the forelands and havens of the grey sea, but the waves, as they come rolling in, stay it, that it can come no further, though all else is wrapped as with a mantle, so heavy are the heavens with snow. Even thus thickly did the stones fall on one side and on the other, some thrown at the Trojans, and some by the Trojans at the Achaeans, and the whole wall was in an uproar. Still the Trojans and brave Hector would not yet have broken down the gates and the great bar, had not Jove turned his son Sarpedon against the Argives, as a lion against a herd of horned cattle. Before him he held his shield of hammered bronze, that the smith had beaten so fair and round, and had lined with ox hides, which he had made fast with rivets of gold all round the shield. This he held in front of him, and brandishing his two spears, came on like some lion of the wilderness, who has been long famished for want of meat, and will dare break even into a well-fenced homestead to try and get at the sheep. He may find the shepherds keeping watch over their flocks with dogs and spears, but he is in no mind to be driven from the fold till he has had a try for it. He will either spring on a sheep or carry it off, or be hit by a spear from some strong hand. Even so was Sarpedon fain to attack the wall and break down its battlements. Then he said to Glaucus, son of Hippolochus, "Glaucus, why in Lycia do we receive a special honour as regards our place at table? Why are the choicest portions served us, and our cups kept brimming, and why do men look up to us as though we were gods? Moreover, we hold a large estate by the banks of the river Xanthus, fair with orchard lawns and wheat-growing land. It becomes us, therefore, to take our stand at the head of all the Lycians, and bear the brunt of the fight, that one may say to another, 'Our princes in Lycia eat the fat of the land and drink best of wine, but they are fine fellows. They fight well, and are ever at the front in battle.' My good friend, if, when we were once out of this fight, we could escape old age and death thenceforward and forever, I should neither press forward myself nor bid you do so. But death in 10,000 shapes hangs ever over our heads, and no man can elude him. Therefore let us go forward, and either win glory for ourselves or yield it to another." Glaucus heeded his saying, and the pair forthwith led on the host of Lycians. Mnestheus, son of Peteos, was dismayed when he saw them, for it was against his part of the wall that they came, bringing destruction with them. He looked along the wall for some chieftain to support his comrades, and saw the two Ajaxes, men ever eager for the fray, and Teucer, who had just come from his tent, standing near them. But he could not make his voice heard by shouting to them, so great an uproar was there from crashing shields and helmets, and the battering of gates with a din which reached the skies. For all the gates had been closed, and the Trojans were hammering at them to try and break their way through them. Menesthius therefore sent Tootes with a message to Ajax. "Run, good Tootes," he said, "and call Ajax, or better still bid both come, for it will be all over with us here directly. The leaders of the Lycians are upon us, men who have ever fought desperately heretofore. But if they have too much on their hands to let them come, at any rate let Ajax son of Telamon do so, and let Teucer, the famous bowman, come with him." The messenger did as he was told, and set off running along the wall of the Achaeans. When he reached the Ajaxes, he said to them, "Sirs, princes of the Argives, the son of noble Peteos bids you come to him for a while and help him. You had better both come if you can, or it will be all over with him directly. The leaders of the Lycians are upon him, men who have ever fought desperately heretofore. If you have too much on your hands to let both come, at any rate let Ajax son of Telamon do so, and let Teucer, the famous bowman, come with him." Great Ajax son of Telamon heeded the message, and at once spoke to the son of Oileus. "Ajax," said he, "do you too, yourself and brave Lycomedes, stay here and keep the Danaans in heart to fight their hardest. I will go over yonder and bear my part in the fray, but I will come back here at once as soon as I have given them the help they need." With this Ajax son of Telamon set off, and Teucer his brother by the same father went also, with Pandion to carry Teucer's bow. They went along inside the wall, and when they came to the tower where Menesthius was, and hard pressed indeed did they find him, the brave captains and leaders of the Lycians were storming the battlements as it were a thick dark cloud, fighting in close quarters, and raising the battle cry aloud. First Ajax son of Telamon killed brave Epicles, a comrade of Sarpedon, hitting him with a jagged stone that lay by the battlements at the very top of the wall. As men now are, even one who was in the bloom of youth could hardly lift it with his 2 hands, but Ajax raised it high aloft and flung it down, smashing Epicles' 4-crested helmet so that the bones of his head were crushed to pieces, and he fell from the high wall as though he were diving, with no more life left in him. Then Teucer wounded Glaucus, the brave son of Hippolochus, as he was coming on to attack the wall. He saw his shoulder bare, and aimed an arrow at it, which made Glaucus leave off fighting. Thereon he sprang covertly down for fear some of the Achaeans might see that he was wounded, and taunt him. Sarpedon was stung with grief when he saw Glaucus leave him. Still he did not leave off fighting, but aimed his spear at Alcmaeon, the son of Thestor, and hit him. He drew his spear back again, and Alcmaeon came down headlong after it, with his bronzed armour rattling around him. Then Sarpedon seized the battlement in his strong hands, and tugged at it till it all gave way together, and a breach was made through which many might pass. Ajax and Teucer then both of them attacked him. Teucer hit him with an arrow on the band that bore the shield which covered his body, but Jove saved his son from destruction, that he might not fall by the ship's sterns. Meanwhile Ajax sprang on him and pierced his shield, but the spear did not go clean through, though it hustled him back that he could come on no further. He therefore retired a little space from the battlement, yet without losing all his ground, for he still thought to cover himself with glory. Then he turned round and shouted to the brave Lycians, saying, "Lycians, why do you thus fail me? For all my prowess I cannot break through the wall and open a way to the ship single-handed. Come close on behind me, for the more there are of us, the better." The Lycians, shamed by his rebuke, pressed closer round him, who was their counsellor and their king. The Argives, on their part, got their men in fighting order within the wall, and there was a deadly struggle between them. The Lycians could not break through the wall and force their way to the ships, nor could the Danaans drive the Lycians from the wall now that they had once reached it. As 2 men, measuring rods in hand, quarrel about their boundaries in a field that they own in common, and stickle for their rights even though they be but a mere strip, even so did the battlements now serve as a bone of contention, and they beat one another's round shields for their possession. Many a man's body was wounded with the pitiless bronze as he turned round and bared his back to the foe, and many were struck clean through their shields. The wall and battlements were everywhere deluged with the blood alike of Trojans and of Achaeans. But even so the Trojans could not rout the Achaeans, who still held on, and as some honest, hard-working woman weighs wool in her balance and sees that the scales be true, for she would gain some pitiful earnings for her little ones, even so was the fight balanced evenly between them, till the time came when Jove gave the greater glory to Hector, son of Priam, who was first to spring towards the wall of the Achaeans. When he had done so, he cried aloud to the Trojans, "Up, Trojans, break the wall of the Argives, and fling fire upon their ships." Thus did he hound them on, and in one body they rushed straight at the wall as he had bidden them, and scaled the battlements with sharp spears in their hands. Hector laid hold of a stone that lay just outside the gates, and was thick at one end but pointed at the other. Two of the best men in a town, as men now are, could hardly raise it from the ground and put it onto a waggon, but Hector lifted it quite easily by himself, for the son of scheming Saturn made it light for him. As a shepherd picks up a ram's fleece with one hand and finds it no burden, so easily did Hector lift the great stone and drive it right at the doors that closed the gates so strong and so firmly set. These doors were double and high, and were kept closed by two crossbars, to which there was but one key. When he had got close up to them, Hector strode towards them, that his blow might gain in force, and struck them in the middle, leaning his whole weight against them. He broke both hinges, and the stone fell inside by reason of its great weight. The portals re-echoed with the sound, the bars held no longer, and the doors flew open, one way and the other, through the force of the blow. Then brave Hector leaped inside with a face as dark as that of flying night. The gleaming bronze flashed fiercely about his body, and he had two spears in his hand. None but a god could have withstood him as he flung himself into the gateway, and his eyes glared like fire. Then he turned round towards the Trojans and called on them to scale the wall, and they did as he bade them, some of them at once climbing over the wall, while others passed through the gates. The Danaans then fled, panic-stricken, towards their ships, and all was uproar and confusion.